That was a very interesting panel that is also a great segue into our next keynote on discussing your purpose for what we create and how we share what we create. So if you're a startup, you're already disruptive. You know what it means to seek out challenges and rethink the parameters of what's possible. If you're a brand, you need to know how to stay ahead of the curve. But the question is, do you know your purpose beyond sales and monetization? Do you know which businesses you want to be aligned with now and years from now? So this next keynote is on purpose and partnerships between brands and startups to create more value and better value for the customers and company culture. This keynote will be given by Melissa June Rowley, and she has worked for over a decade at the intersection of tech, media, and social impact. She's a former field producer for CNN and the Associated Press, and she is currently the CEO of Humanize and the co-founder of The Toolbox, which is a humanitarian tech initiative, co-chaired or chaired by Peter Gabriel. So please, let's give a huge and warm round of applause for Melissa June Rowley.
Hello, thank you for joining me. Before I get started, can I see by a show of hands how many of you are content creators? Anybody? Okay, good. Are you also entrepreneurs? Any brands, corporations, banks? Okay, just a few of you. Good, so as Sarah mentioned, today I'm going to speak with you about why purpose and partnership are vital for creating value within your company's culture and for your content consumers as well as your users. And then we're going to get a little bit into how to kind of fine-tune your purpose if you're not quite sure what it is, and how you can keep that at the forefront of your brain. And I'm going to start by sharing with you a story about an existential crisis I had less than a year ago. I have them about once a year, so we're going well so far. I haven't had any while, but I was on the precipice of burnout. I was building a technology and content platform focused on humanitarian needs and social impact with Peter Gabriel. He's a very big activist and legendary musician, founded Genesis. So you'd think we'd have all the funding in the world. We didn't, and he doesn't fund it himself. The funding was starting to run out, and we were doing, or my small team and I were doing everything we could to keep the lights on. To make a long story short, I was definitely on the precipice of burnout. Have any of you experienced burnout or feel like you're going to? Be honest. Okay, not that many of you. So what we realized was that we needed to think bigger. We were starting to lose sight of why we were doing what we were doing in the first place, because we were scrambling for funding and we were starting to lose sight of our vision. Without your vision at the forefront of everything you do, you can't forge partnerships, you can't scale, you can't measure KPIs, you can't do any of that shit unless you understand what your vision is. So because I was falling into this kind of dark pit of despair, I had plenty of time to think on my own and spend some time with myself. And I said, why am I doing this? I know that the mission is to scale. I know that the mission is to get more users and more readers. I know that the mission is to get funding right now, but why am I doing this? And the answer was really to make the world a better place, to have a social impact on humanitarians and activists, and to help social entrepreneurs in our community. So getting back to the mission, we started to figure out the goal and the purpose. And we realized that while we were a quote-unquote social impact organization, we had lost sight of our purpose for quite some time. So we decided to start thinking bigger. We realized that during our burnout, we were playing too small. And now it might seem strange if you're going through some kind of struggle with building your business and figuring out your next stages and strategy, that thinking big doesn't really make sense. But it actually, you can turn it around and make perfect sense and find a through line through partnership. So we decided that we would take the lead from other startups that we'd seen that were not focused on social impact, that were more focused on, say, e-commerce or content monetization, or health, digital publishing. And we saw the kinds of partnerships they were forging with major brands in the United States, throughout Europe, and in the UK. So there is a trend going on in the States, and I have a feeling it's going to migrate its way over here within the next couple of years, and it has to do with brands and startups forming partnerships. Essentially, as Sarah said in the introduction, if you are a startup, you're already disruptive. You are already seeking out challenges. You're already taking on a huge, impossible goal, and you're working your asses off to get it done. If you're a brand or a corporation or a bank, you might be a little concerned that artificial intelligence is going to take your jobs in the next few years. And if you're not, you should be, because that's what's about to happen. So a lot of brands are looking for ways to, quote unquote, disrupt themselves. And we're seeing a lot of this happen with big firms such as Accenture. They have launched a fintech accelerator in Dubai so that they can be closer to fintech accelerators. Some of you might have heard of that. Barclays and MasterCard already have accelerator programs that give them access to startups innovating in fintech. GE has an open innovation challenge that goes on consistently where they invite the global community to pitch technology and software solutions to help them build their business and make the world a better place. Motorola recently launched something called Motorola Moto Mods, where they're inviting startups to create hardware off of their platform. Unilever just launched a co-working space in Singapore so that they can collaborate directly with startups in that region. IBM announced 3 partnerships with startups to develop applications that use its Watson AI technology to ultimately transfer the future of sports. USAID Developed Innovation Ventures has invested $100,000 in MWater, a nonprofit tech startup testing and analyzing local water sources. Coca-Cola supports the UP Global Network, which combines Startup America's expertise with the impact and reach of Startup Weekend's networking and hands-on collaboration programs. Not too long ago, Uber and the NFL partnered to produce a special service for NFL players to use the app to call for rides and avoid driving under the influence. So, which brings me back to the burnout story that I started off telling you. When we finally realized that we needed to start thinking bigger and started thinking of strategic partnerships, I remembered a conversation that I had with an executive at Qualcomm. She had seen me speak at an event, and she said, I really like what you're trying to do. I know that you're a small startup, but you're creating great content, and you're a great curator of content, and we need that. Maybe we should talk because our visions seem to be aligned. And I said, okay, yeah, that's great, but I need to go get funding. I'll talk to you another time, because it didn't occur to me that a brand that massive, Qualcomm is one of the leaders in 3G and 4G technology around the world. It did not occur to me that they would ever give us the time of day or want to work with a very lesser-known startup such as us. But then going back to thinking bigger, I was talking to an advisor about what we were faced with, and he said, listen, you just need to get over it and close the fucking deal. So I went to Qualcomm and I said, here's what we can do for you. We are not a big technology company. We don't create the technology ourselves, but we are publishers. We are content curators. We help the social impact space. We have connections, and we are relationship builders, and this is what I can do for you. So they sponsored us with a strategic partnership, and then the rest is soon to be history. We're now evolving to our next iteration. Which brings me back to, again, the trend of startups and brands that are starting to partner. So there's different events that are happening around the world. There's, some of you might be familiar with an event called Web Summit. They hold a lot of different pitch events where brands are sponsoring them so they can see the startups and have access to that innovation community. There's a thing in the US called Switch Pitch where established companies pitch funded innovation projects to qualified startups looking for great partners. And so to get to this, these are just some questions that I go over with people that I work with, clients and people that I coach. Most of these questions you probably already have answered, but it's really important to go through them on a regular basis so you can always be selling, always be closing. What's your core value proposition? What are 3 top partnerships that you want to close and why? What's your company's culture, and does it align with your potential partner's culture? There was a partnership that I saw a few years ago between the Susan G. Komen Foundation, Breast Cancer Foundation, and KFC. And it was Kentucky Fried Chicken and breast cancer awareness. They didn't really go hand in hand. So make sure if you're going to target a brand and if you're a corporation, if you're looking for a startup, make sure that your vision is aligned, that it makes sense for the story and the purpose that you want to share with the rest of the world. How do your customers benefit from what you're doing? How do your stakeholders benefit from what you're doing? How do you differentiate from an existing way of doing business? What's your secret sauce? Why is your product better than anything else out there, and why are you doing this? Again, getting you back to the purpose. For those of you that want to work with brands, or for the brands that want to potentially work with startups, do your homework. Contact these accelerator programs, some of which I mentioned. Trust me, there will be more starting to flood this market within the next couple of years. It's not just happening in the West, it's migrating over here. Get in front of brands at pitch events and conferences. Identify and reach out to people at some of the big firms of special projects and alliances, innovation and entrepreneurship. Somebody at one of the top big firms just approached us recently. Like I said, they said, we're looking for ways to disrupt ourselves, and we need to get ahead of the curve because AI is going to take all of our jobs in a few years, and startups know how to navigate that world. And then in order to get into some of your purpose, I'd like to do a quick exercise with you. You will have paper and pens, not people standing in the back. But so you see up here I've got written these 5 words. Now, these are 5 areas of focus. Some of you probably practice on what the 5 areas of focus in your life should be on a regular basis. I do not, so I have sticky notes around my house reminding myself of the order. If you're a founder, if you're an entrepreneur or an entrepreneur, or if you're at a brand or a corporation in charge of a large team, it's really easy to get caught up in the details because you might be wearing a million different hats. You might be worried about different group dynamics. You might be sending out too many emails and keeping track of too many schedules and then getting really bogged down by that. It's really easy to then fall into the problems, which lead to the drama. If you're in charge of a team, and if you are building a brand or a company of your own, your job is to stay at the planning and the vision and the purpose. As soon as you get underneath that, things start to fall apart. If you are down in the details, problems, drama, just go back up here and take a step back. And it seems pretty common sense, but it's very easy to forget about that. So just to recap some of the things that you can do to kind of get back to your purpose and to start thinking about the kind of partnerships that you want to forge now and in the future. Never stop asking why. It's never too early to think big, and if you're not thinking big enough to scare yourself, then you're not thinking big. I know that's cliche, but it's really, really true. If things aren't working, you might be not thinking big enough. There's never been a better time for startups and brands to partner. This doesn't just mean for startups. If you're a startup, you want the brand for their power, their influence, their legacy, and their distribution, mainly distribution, especially content creators, right? But if you're a brand, you need the startups for their nimbleness, their agility, their creativity, and their ability to collaborate. There's never been a better time for this, and it's starting to unfold more across the world. Examples of startups and brands working together, we went over some of those. I'm happy to share the presentation if any of you are interested in looking at that more and doing a little bit of research on some other partnerships that have been successful. Questions to help you determine your purpose, we went over those. Do your homework, and the 5 areas of focus, which are vision, planning, details, problems, and drama, which you do not want any of. So, how can you optimize this trend of startups and brands? State your purpose, know what you want, know how your goals can align with the brand's goals. Determine how you can weave the partnership into your company's story. Again, if it doesn't align with your company's mission and values, just don't do it. It might be pretty and shiny and glossy. Don't do it. Research and learn the brand's goals and challenges and how to best appeal and contribute to their strategic objectives. You know why you need them, but why do they need you? Trust me, they need you. What can you help them achieve? And just because you haven't gotten your Series A yet, or your Series B, or you haven't been written about in TechCrunch or an equivalent publication, doesn't mean that you don't have something of really great value to offer a large corporation. And lastly, keep your head down and stay humble. Are there any questions? Yes. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Hi. When you talk about the 5 areas of focus, I'm trying to put myself in the shoes of a startup, where maybe you have, between, 2 to 6 people in the company in the beginning. How does the founder actually not get involved in the details when you're that small? I think most of them do need to.
Yeah. So if anybody didn't hear, she just asked, how do you not get involved in the details if you're a really small team at a startup? You do get involved in the details, no matter what, but you have to take time to step back and keep the vision alive. There's no way to not get involved in the details, but in order to stay away from the drama, keep going back to the vision.
Okay.
Any other questions? Okay. I think we're all good then. Thank you.